July 26th, 2016. Mansfield, Texas. The night was forgettable, and that is what made it dangerous. Inside a modest house tucked into a quiet Texas neighborhood, the air felt heavy with late summer humidity. The kind that lingers even after sunset. The kind that makes ceiling fans hum louder than conversations. Ethan Walker was 21 years old. He was sitting on a couch, one leg stretched out, laughing at something one of his friends had just said. The television played in the background, not because anyone was really watching it, but because silence feels strange when you're young and alive. There was no tension in the room, no sense of threat, no instinct whispering that the night would end differently than it began. They were not criminals. There was no drug operation hidden in a bedroom, no safe filled with money, just young men passing time in the safest place they knew, home. Then came a crash. The front door didn't open. It exploded inward. Wood splintered. Hinges screamed. Before anyone could stand, before anyone could process what was happening, figures rushed inside. Masks, hoodies, guns. Get on the ground. The words weren't suggestions. They were commands soaked in adrenaline. The room changed instantly. Laughter vanished. Breathing sharpened. Hearts pounded against ribs hard enough to hurt. Ethan lowered himself to the floor. His cheek pressed against cool tile. His mind scrambled to make sense of it. This wasn't supposed to happen here. The intruders moved fast, aggressive, convinced they were about to walk out richer than they walked in. They had been told there were drugs. They had been told there was money. But drawers opened to nothing. Closets revealed nothing. Kitchen cabinets held plates, not profit. The energy shifted. Confusion turned to anger. One of the masked teenagers cursed loudly. Someone demanded to know where the stash was. There was no stash. The robbery was built on a lie. And when expectations collapse in the hands of someone holding a gun, reality becomes fragile. The gunshot came without warning. It was not dramatic. It was not cinematic. It was sudden, and it was final. Ethan felt impact before understanding. A hot shock, then a wave of cold. The room seemed to tilt. Sound distorted. He collapsed fully to the floor. Not in fear now, but in surrender to gravity. His friends screamed his name, but the world was already pulling away from him. The masked teenagers fled. They had gained nothing. Nothing except a body left behind on a living room floor. Ethan Walker died for $0. Miles away from that house, another teenager's name would soon enter police reports. Tamor McIntyre. To friends and acquaintances, he was simply Tay-K. 16 years old. 16 is a strange age. Old enough to make irreversible decisions. Young enough to believe they aren't irreversible. Tay-K had not been inside the house pulling drawers open that night. But investigators would later say he helped orchestrate the plan. The target, the entry, the assumption of profit. It had seemed simple, an easy score. When detectives began untangling the threads, phone records, messages, statements, the name Tay-K surfaced quickly. He was arrested weeks later. In the interrogation room, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. There were no masks here, no shouting, no adrenaline, just a table bolted to the floor. A teenage boy in a chair. He avoided eye contact at first. His leg bounced slightly, a nervous rhythm. When confronted with evidence, his shoulders sank. He admitted involvement, not the trigger pull itself, but the planning, the armed entry, the robbery attempt that spiraled into homicide. The justice system prepared to process him, and then it made a decision that would shape everything that followed. He was released on house arrest. An ankle monitor was clipped around his leg, a small black device designed to measure distance and enforce boundaries. It was not freedom, but it was not prison. While Ethan's mother stood at a podium describing her son as kind, hardworking, and full of life, while a casket was lowered into the earth, Tay-K slept in his own bedroom. The contrast was invisible to the world, but it existed. Weeks passed, then months. The ankle monitor blinked softly in the dark at night. A reminder, a warning, a boundary. On social media, Tay-K began posting. Not apologies, not reflections, complaints. He was bored, frustrated, stuck. In his mind, the problem was not the life lost. The problem was restriction. House arrest felt like humiliation. The bracelet around his leg felt like control. And control, to a 16-year-old who had tasted adrenaline and power, felt unbearable. One afternoon, sitting alone in his room, he stared at the device. It looked small, fragile, temporary. He reached for scissors. There is always a moment before a decision becomes action, a pause where the future could still change. If Tay-K felt that pause, he ignored it. The plastic snapped with a sharp crack. The monitor fell uselessly to the floor. Silence followed. He waited. Nothing happened. No alarms. No immediate sirens. Just the quiet hum of an air conditioner. He stood up, walked out of the house, and stepped into a different future. He wasn't alone for long. Another teenager on house arrest followed his example. 2 defendants awaiting trial. Now fugitives. They ran without a roadmap, without savings, without long-term strategy. Just adrenaline and the belief that distance equals safety. But running is expensive. Hotels cost money. Gas costs money. Food costs money. And fugitives don't qualify for jobs. By early 2017, the thrill had worn thin. Desperation replaced it. They needed cash, and they needed it quickly. By the spring of 2017, running no longer felt cinematic. It felt exhausting. Tay-K had imagined something different when he cut the ankle monitor off his leg. He had imagined motion as freedom. Highways stretching endlessly forward, state lines crossed like invisible victories. But reality was smaller than that. Reality was borrowed couches, cheap motel rooms that smelled like stale smoke, whispers instead of conversations, watching every car that slowed down too long. The adrenaline that once made his heart race had settled into something heavier, a constant, low hum of pressure. Money was disappearing. Gas tanks emptied faster than expected. Friends who once felt loyal began feeling distant. Every dollar counted. Running requires resources, and fugitives don't have paychecks. So they turned to what had worked before. Robbery. But this time, they didn't want to kick down doors. That had ended badly. That had created headlines. They needed something quieter, something controlled. They needed someone who would walk into the trap willingly. That's when social media became a tool. Instagram was not designed for crime. It was designed for connection, for creativity, for business. But like any tool, it could be repurposed. Scrolling became strategy. They searched for someone young, someone who advertised their work publicly, someone who met clients alone. They found him in a grid of photographs. Mark Anthony Saldivar, 23 years old. His page was filled with portraits, sharp images framed carefully, edited with precision. Couples laughing, solo shots in golden light, city backdrops, clean composition. Mark wasn't famous, but he was building something. Each post was proof that he believed in progress, that he believed effort would eventually turn into stability. He wasn't reckless online. He didn't flash money. He didn't flaunt luxury, but he did advertise availability. DM for bookings. To someone desperate enough, that was an opening. A fake account reached out. Polite, direct, interested in a photo shoot. The conversation felt normal. Dates discussed. Location chosen. Details vague, but believable. For Mark, this was routine. Freelancers live off opportunities like this. You answer inquiries. You show up. You do the work. You trust that most people are who they say they are. April 23rd, 2017. San Antonio, Texas. The sun hung high in a clear sky. It was an ordinary Sunday. Families ate lunch. Cars filled parking lots. Life moved without tension. Mark arrived at a Chick-fil-A parking lot carrying his camera equipment. Inside the bag was more than glass and metal. It was investment. Hours worked. Savings spent. Belief in himself. He scanned the parking lot. A car pulled in. He approached casually. The windows were slightly tinted. He couldn't see clearly inside, but nothing felt immediately wrong. Parking lots are neutral spaces. Public, visible, safe. He opened the passenger door and stepped inside. The shift happened instantly. The tone changed. The energy sharpened. There was no talk of lighting, no discussion of price. Instead, a gun appeared. Cold, immediate, unmistakable. Mark's brain had no time to rationalize. Confusion collided with fear. Give it up. The command cut through the air. His hands moved before his thoughts could catch up. Camera, lenses, bag. They took everything. The robbery was fast, efficient, controlled. Too controlled. They had done this before. Mark's chest tightened. This wasn't just theft. It was violation. His equipment wasn't replaceable overnight. It wasn't insured against recklessness. It was survival. When they pushed him out of the vehicle and prepared to drive away, something inside him refused to accept it. It was not bravery. It was instinct. A split-second calculation that losing everything might be worse than taking a risk. He reached for the door, for the car, for the only thing that connected him to his livelihood. Stop. The vehicle lurched. Another gunshot split the air. In a crowded parking lot on a bright afternoon, The sound echoed differently than it had inside a house months earlier. It didn't hide between walls. It carried. Mark staggered, then collapsed onto the asphalt. The Texas sun remained indifferent overhead. Cars slowed. Voices rose. Someone screamed, but the car was already pulling away. Inside, adrenaline surged again. The robbery had escalated, not because it needed to, but because panic and ego collided in a confined space. 23 years old, Mark Saldivar died in a parking lot over camera equipment. Not over revenge, not over survival necessity, over desperation layered on top of arrogance. News spreads differently in the age of social media. Within hours, posts circulated. Photographs of police tape, descriptions of suspects, speculation. For Tay-K, the weight of what had happened did not settle the way it should have. Instead of slowing down, something hardened. 2 deaths now trailed behind him, 2 families grieving, and yet he was still free, still moving, still breathing. Fear could have taken over at this point. He could have disappeared quietly, gone silent, minimized movement, but something else began to form. An idea. If he was already being hunted, if his name was already circulating, if his face might eventually be known, why not control the narrative? Why not turn pursuit into performance? The line between criminal and persona began to blur. Some fugitives hide, others mythologize themselves. In cheap rooms and borrowed spaces far from Texas, Tay-K started thinking less about survival and more about identity. He was no longer just running from law enforcement. He was running towards something. Recognition. The second death did not slow him. It accelerated him. By the time they reached New Jersey, distance had begun to feel like protection. Over 1,000 miles separated Tay-K from Texas. 1,000 miles from courtrooms, from grieving families, from the living rooms where blood had once stained tile and asphalt. Geography can create illusion. The further you travel from consequence, the more abstract it feels. New Jersey was colder than Texas. The air sharper, the streets unfamiliar. Tay-K stayed with acquaintances, friends of friends, temporary allies willing to offer a couch for a night or two. Every place was temporary, every stay conditional. But something had shifted inside him. He wasn't just running anymore. He was thinking. 2 murders trailed behind him. His name was circulating in law enforcement circles. It was only a matter of time before his face would be made public. For some, that realization would bring fear. For Tay-K, it sparked opportunity. If the world was going to look at him, he would decide how. Music had always existed in the background of his life. Freestyles, studio sessions, dreams shared casually between friends who believed talent alone could bend reality. Now, reality had bent first, and instead of retreating, he leaned forward. Under the name Tay-K, he began recording. The irony was sharp. He was a fugitive wanted for murder, stepping into a studio to create art about being a fugitive wanted for murder. The song came together quickly. Raw, aggressive, unfiltered. It wasn't remorseful. It wasn't reflective. It was defiant. The title was almost too obvious. The race. The race against police. The race against capture. The race against consequence. The lyrics didn't hide the truth. They flaunted it. He referenced running, evading, violence, status. There was no coded language. No metaphor thick enough to disguise reality. It was a soundtrack to his own indictment. But in the moment, it didn't feel incriminating. It felt powerful. Recording the song gave shape to the chaos. It turned panic into rhythm. It turned fear into bass. And then came the decision that changed everything. He wouldn't just release the song. He would film a video. Most fugitives disappear into shadows. Tay-K stepped into a camera lens. The video shoot wasn't elaborate. It didn't need to be. The authenticity was the spectacle. He stood in streets wearing confidence like armor. He held a gun casually, as if it were a prop. He smiled. There is a difference between smiling because you're happy and smiling because you believe you've won. This was the second kind. At one point during filming, someone suggested including something bold, something undeniable. They found it online, the wanted poster. His face printed clearly. His name, the words, suspect in a murder. Instead of recoiling from it, he posed beside it. He grinned at it, as if it were an achievement unlocked, as if notoriety itself were currency. In that moment, something irreversible happened. The line between person and persona disappeared. Tay-K, the teenager facing trial, faded. Tay-K, the outlaw artist, emerged. The video was uploaded. The internet did what it always does when controversy meets rhythm. It amplified. Views climbed fast. Comments poured in. Some praised the audacity. Some criticized the violence. Some didn't care about context at all. They just liked the beat. Music blogs shared it. Social media accounts reposted clips. For a brief window of time, he wasn't just a fugitive. He was viral. And viral fame has a dangerous quality. It feels like validation. When numbers climb, it creates the illusion of approval, of support, of invincibility. But numbers don't distinguish between fans and federal agents. Every view is just visibility, and visibility is exposure. The tweet came next. Short, confident. The feds can't hold me. There are moments in life that age instantly. This was one of them. The message spread quickly. Screenshots circulated. The combination of an active murder suspect openly mocking federal authorities and releasing a song about running was irresistible to media outlets. But attention has gravity. As the video gained traction, so did recognition. People began connecting dots. The face in the video looked familiar. The name matched news reports from Texas. Tips began forming before they were even submitted. A neighbor recognized the location in the background. Someone identified a street. Someone else thought they had seen him nearby. Law enforcement doesn't need certainty. They need probability. And probability was building. Less than 24 hours after the tweet, the knock came. There is no soundtrack when federal agents approach a residence. No dramatic buildup, just controlled movement. Doors opened, commands issued. This time, there were no masks. No adrenaline-fueled shouting, just authority. Handcuffs closed around wrists that had once held a microphone confidently. The race ended quietly. No dramatic chase. No final escape. Just metal against skin. The irony settled in slowly, like cold water rising. The same video that propelled him into viral recognition had narrowed his hiding space to almost nothing. The same lyrics that energized listeners would soon be replayed in courtrooms. Performance had consequences. Fame had fingerprints. As he was transported back into custody, the persona began to crack. The camera was gone. The music stopped. In reality, patient, slow, inevitable, reclaimed its place. But the story was no longer just about robbery, or even about murder. It was now about something uniquely modern. A teenager who documented his own defiance. A fugitive who marketed his escape. A crime that became content, and content that became evidence. On the other side of the country, two families still lived in silence. No viral moment could fill the empty chairs at dinner tables. No trending song could reverse a gunshot. The world debated the music, but grief remained offline. Courtrooms do not care about momentum. They do not care about streams, followers, or viral reach. They care about sequence, about evidence, about cause and consequence. By the time Tay-K was brought back to Texas, the performance was over. No camera crew followed him through intake processing. No baseline played beneath the clink of handcuffs. Just paperwork, steel doors, time. Years passed between the arrests and the trials. Years in which the internet moved on to other headlines, other controversies, other songs. But the families did not move on. For them, time did not soften the absence. It sharpened it. 2019. The courtroom in Tarrant County felt smaller than the rooms where the music video had been filmed. Smaller than the idea of fame. Tay-K sat at the defense table in a suit that did not quite erase his youth. He was no longer the boy with scissors cutting off an ankle monitor. He was no longer the smiling figure beside a wanted poster. He was a defendant facing decades. Ethan Walker's family sat behind the prosecution. Grief had aged them. There is a specific kind of stillness that fills a courtroom when a mother looks at the person accused of killing her child. It is not rage. It is something heavier. The jury listened as prosecutors reconstructed July 26, 2016. The door bursting open, the shouting, the gunshot. Witnesses described the confusion. The fear pressed against the floor. They described Ethan falling. The defense tried to create distance between planning and pulling the trigger. But distance in law is not always distance in responsibility. Participation carries weight. When the jury left to deliberate, the room felt suspended. Tay-K stared ahead. No music now, no persona, just a man waiting. The verdict came back, guilty. 55 years. The number echoed in the room. 55, longer than he had been alive. Ethan's mother did not celebrate. There are no victories in rooms like that. Only confirmations. But it wasn't over. There was another name waiting in the system. Mark Saldivar. Years later, Tay-K stood trial again. Different courtroom. Same gravity. This time, the story moved from a living room in Mansfield to a parking lot in San Antonio. Mark's photographs were shown to the jury. Smiling clients, couples, city lights, evidence of a future that no longer existed. Prosecutors described the Instagram message, the fake account, the calculated meeting. They walked the jury through the Chick-fil-A parking lot. Midday sun, public space, false sense of safety. Then, they made a decision that changed the tone of the room. They played the music video. The screen flickered to life. There he was, younger, louder, confident, smiling beside his own wanted poster, rapping about the race. The jurors watched quietly. The contrast was sharp. On one side of the courtroom sat Mark's family, parents who would never see their son walk through a door again. On the screen played a performance of defiance filmed while he was running from the law. Lyrics filled the silence. Boasts about evading capture, about being untouchable. The prosecution didn't need to exaggerate. They didn't need dramatic commentary. The video spoke for itself. It revealed mindset, not panic, not fear, but pride. The defense argued artistic expression, persona versus reality. But art filmed beside a wanted poster while actively evading arrest blurred that distinction. When the jury deliberated, the wait felt longer than before. Because this time, it wasn't just about participation. It was about escalation. The verdict came back. Guilty, 80 years, added to the previous 55, 135 years total. A sentence longer than most lifetimes. Prison erases volume. There are no trending sounds inside concrete walls. No algorithm. No viral spikes. Just routine. Morning counts. Metal trays. Locked doors. Outside, the song still exists online. It can be streamed, shared, quoted. But the man behind it lives in a different rhythm now, measured in years rather than views. Ethan Walker will forever be 21. Mark Saldivar will forever be 23. Their stories do not trend. They do not resurface in playlists, but they echo in quieter ways. At birthdays that feel incomplete, at holidays with empty chairs, in framed photographs that no longer age. Tay-K once believed distance created safety. Then he believed visibility created power. He believed turning his life into a spectacle would make him untouchable. But spectacle can also become documentation. The camera that once amplified his voice ultimately preserved his defiance for 12 jurors to study in silence. The tweet, "The feds can't hold me," now reads less like confidence and more like prophecy inverted. Because in the end they did. Not through drama, not through a cinematic chase, but through patience, through evidence, through process. Fame is loud. Consequences are quiet. One lasts for a moment. The other lasts for generations. Subscribe for more.